afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. Just to be clear, this is the whitest shirt you will ever see me. And my name is Paulo Futre Jr. I'm the older son of Futre, the former player of Atletico Madrid. It's crazy how the football has evolved since I was a kid. I remember playing with my dad at Sensible Soccer 94 at the Super NES, the Super Nintendo. Now he's in EA Sports FC25, so it's a crazy, crazy evolution. And I remember a quote from Lord Kelvin, the renowned mathematician and physicist, who said, "What can't be defined can't be measured, what can't be measured cannot be improved, and what is not improved often decays." And here we are with this challenge. I'm going to ask to Sebas, the responsible of Rayo Vallecano, how he deals with all this measurement and how they apply this in Rayo Vallecano that he is responsible for. So, Sebastián, por favor, sí. Cuéntanos cómo te enfrentas a estos desafíos en el Rayo.
Vale, a ver, al final el día a día en el fútbol es muy rápido. No tenemos tiempo para coger toda la información. Antes de la llegada de StepOut al Rayo, teníamos los analistas clicando todos los eventos, toda la data que necesitábamos para optimizar el rendimiento de nuestros jugadores, y obviamente eso en el día a día se transformaba en muchos días para poder tener la información y luego esa información transformarla en información relevante o importante que queremos transmitir, ya sea cuerpos técnicos o jugadores, para mejorar su rendimiento. Después de la llegada de StepOut y de la inteligencia artificial, nos ahorra muchísimo tiempo. ¿Por qué? Porque termina el partido el domingo tenemos el partido, lo subimos en la plataforma y en 20 horas tenemos toda esa data que nos demoraba 3-4 días en clicar cada evento, pues lo tenemos en 20 horas. Entonces, ese tiempo que perdíamos en obtener esa información, nosotros lo optimizamos para saber qué hacer con esa información y para que esa información llegue al jugador, porque al final hay mucha información que hay que filtrar y ese tiempo lo utilizamos para que nuestros analistas, nuestros psicólogos, nuestros preparadores físicos filtren esa información y al jugador el martes le llega la información, porque ya hay que pensar en el siguiente partido, que es el siguiente sábado o el siguiente domingo. Entonces el tiempo...
Y Sebas, perdona por interrumpirte, más o menos, ¿cuánto tiempo creéis que habéis ahorrado desde que habéis implementado esto?
De media 4 o 5 días. O sea, para que te hagas una idea, al final nosotros tenemos una estructura muy grande. Tenemos alrededor de 100 equipos. Obviamente los 100 equipos no tienen el acceso a toda esta información, pero los 20 equipos de cantera sí que lo tienen. Entonces, cuando teníamos que hacer el clicado de esta información manual, llegabas a 3, 4, 5 equipos como mucho, y a día de hoy podemos llegar a los 20 equipos de dar una información y de poder optimizar esa información que recibimos.
Muy interesante. So the quick resume would be that they managed to get to 5 days since they've been using this technology, which now goes to the one who understands technology. And here we have Sayak, CEO and founder of StepOut. And the question would be, how does this magic work?
Yeah, so...
You are the magician here.
Thanks, Paulo. First of all, thank you all for joining here. It's such a pleasure being able to speak in front of you all. So how the magic works is very simple. You upload the video, we run it through a set of computer vision model, which consists of some object detection models that basically detects the players, and we identify the players by their jersey number. So once you've identified a particular player, we have trackers tracking those players throughout the video. And that way we create a tracking module of each and every player across the 90 minutes. So once we have that metadata, we further translate it, we map it in terms of understanding what are the events, like what are the passes, the tackles, etc. So once this entire process is completed, we have an entire digital simulation of the game with us in the backend, in the form of like an encoded, encrypted data. So this encrypted data is further processed, and then we get to see like the match analysis in terms of your like match summaries, to see possession, XG, XC, all of that. And it also translates to individual player level insights, which is, let's say, how did this player perform, whether he was up to his level, whether the areas he was supposed to develop or grow, improve, he has actually improved or not. So this gives a lot of contextual data with regards to one match. And when you build it up on match by match level, it constitutes to a, let's say, an overall growth perspective on the players. And hence, as you said, in this case, the players and the coaches, they're able to understand the actual measure of the growth.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Very interesting. This also now let's to Jesse here, who was former vice president many years of MLS. So what's the perspective of a league towards all this new development and data?
Yeah, gracias Pablo. Buena pregunta. Voy a contestar en inglés, perdón.
Muy bien.
No, gracias, muchísimas gracias.
Mejor que mi
muy
padre.
amable, muy amable. I think what's so interesting when you look at the United States and the role of sports technology, I think the perception is the U.S. is such a highly developed country. There's so much resources, there's so much infrastructure. But I think we also get asked the question a lot as leaders and executives in professional soccer in the United States. When is the U.S. going to win a World Cup? When will MLS teams compete with the best teams around the world? When is all this development going to happen? And I can tell you, I think the single biggest thing that whether it's at the federation level, whether it's at the league, that we were constantly trying to solve for is access. And access to the sport of soccer in the United States is really where we're at a disadvantage. It's a very big country, there's a lot of people, but how do we get people more access to the sport in more ways? And so that can mean a lot of different things, but I think where technology is helping to accelerate closing that gap is really, really interesting. And I think especially when you look at what StepOut is doing, because the type of access that that's creating is coaches, right, who are maybe not professional coaches, now have access to the same tools that used to only be the types of tools that, Pep Guardiola had at Manchester City, right? And that's a very real thing that's happening in real time in front of us that 2-3 years ago, these technologies didn't exist. And they do today, and I think it's really going to change. It's going to create nothing short of a transformation, including in the United States, to now have greater access to everybody across the landscape, to be able to improve player development, find more players, scouting, and everything that you can imagine. So I think it's a really exciting time, and I think that it's actually incredibly relevant, even in the United States where we have, so many advantages, in terms of, investment in sport. I think this sort of technology is going to be really, really important to the continued sort of growth and transformation.
Mm-hmm. And just out of pure curiosity, as you know very well, there in the US, you've always been like data-driven, with all the Moneyball,
Yes.
in baseball,
Yeah.
NBA, etc. Do you feel that somehow it has inspired the European soccer with all this data?
I believe so. I mean, that, may be very arrogant as, the American to show up and say,
you are hosting the World
you're
Cup,
welcome.
so yeah, you can.
You're welcome for data. But I think in general what I learned, or what my experience in my 15 years at Major League Soccer was, and getting to interact with international soccer, and you all are in the best position to really kind of tell me if this is true or not, and your perspective as well, Paulo. But what I think I saw is that there was a lot of respect for creating, I think, a more professional business around professional soccer, in the sense of let's make sure the economics make sense, right? Mm-hmm. And I think data, technology, driving all that to say, are we being as smart as we can with our investment? Because that's a very American mentality where I think investors in sports teams in the U.S., they see it as a business investment, right? And they don't want to put their money into it if they don't think there's going to be a good financial return on that investment. So they're going to scrutinize everything that they do in a different way, whereas I think the international soccer system is maybe a little different. And now we have financial fair play, and UEFA and FIFA for years have been, working to kind of level the playing field a little bit. But, it's a very different model than I think where you have, sovereign wealth funds that are owning teams and oligarchs because, who wouldn't want to own a sports team if you could? It's fun. And so I think that's a different sort of mentality and outlook than what I think has driven professional sports in the U.S. And I think data and technology and the use of it have been a big part of that kind of outlook and mentality to say, let's be very professional, let's be as sophisticated as we can in what we spend on, and make sure that it's things that, as you said so rightly, we can measure.
Very, very interesting. And now we are going from the abstract to more like real life with Sebas. hay un montón de información, ¿no? Y esto hasta parece como muy abstracto. ¿Cómo se traduce esto en el día a día de gestionar un equipo?
Sí, o sea, al final todo el mundo habla del dato, de la información, de tener mucho dato, y nosotros siempre decimos que lo más importante es el buen dato, ¿no? O la buena información. ¿Por qué? Porque al final al jugador tú no le puedes dar tanta información. Entonces nosotros, o la visión que tenemos con esto es, nosotros tenemos una información que es mucha información, y esa información desde todas las áreas, porque tenemos una perspectiva integral, tenemos una visión de que el fútbol no solo es el balón, sino que es la mentalidad, es a nivel psicológico cómo está el jugador, a nivel nutricional, a nivel de preparación física, y desde esa información que nos lanza a nivel de datos la plataforma, más los cortes de videos automáticos que nos hace, desde cada área se va sacando lo que es importante para la mejora individual del jugador y para la mejora colectiva a nivel de modelo y metodología en el club. Entonces, ¿qué es lo que hacemos? El lunes que tenemos la información, los profesionales de cada área, los psicólogos, analistas, preparadores físicos, filtran esa información, y esa información se generan unos planes de mejora individual para el jugador. Entonces, el jugador cada 3 meses tiene una sesión para marcar objetivos de lo que tiene que mejorar o lo que tiene que potenciar a nivel individual desde el área de psicología, desde el área de análisis, desde el área de nutrición, desde el área de preparación física, y ese es su plan de mejora. Obviamente esta información va a los entrenadores, al área de rendimiento y al jugador, porque al final tenemos que unificar la información que queremos darle, y al jugador no le llegan 100 métricas de rendimiento, le llegan las 3 que son importantes para ese jugador, porque eso es lo importante para su mejora individual. O al entrenador le llegan las 3, 4 cosas que tienen que mejorar a nivel de modelo de juego, a nivel metodológico, que desde el club creemos o consideramos que no se está trabajando bien o que no se están cumpliendo dentro de ese modelo de juego que tenemos creado.
Y yo me crié con un futbolista en casa, además con mucho carácter y algo rebelde, y me iba a preguntar cómo se toman estos futbolistas. ¿Sienten que les vas a dar la chapa o les aporta valor de verdad y lo implementan?
Claro, o sea, al final hay un antes y un después, ¿no? Porque antes, cuando tú le decías a un jugador, tenemos un ejemplo de un jugador hace 2 años que nos decía, no, es que yo no gano duelos defensivos y quiero mejorar eso. Y tú en ese momento, sin dato objetivo y a lo mejor solamente con el ojo, le podías decir, no, pero si tú ganas muchos duelos, y él te decía, no, yo no siento que gano duelos. Ahora tienes algo objetivo para decirle, oye, es que tú de 10 duelos ganas 9, que no eres tan malo en duelos, que a lo mejor tu plan de mejora tiene que ir enfocado a otros aspectos que consideramos más importantes para ti. Y sobre todo, que el jugador entienda no tanto el gano duelos, sino el por qué estás ganando duelos, o por qué no estás ganando duelos, o por qué no estás dando buenos pases, o por qué
¿Podrías decir un ejemplo hipotético de algo que podéis deducir y inferir por los datos que explicaría por qué ganan duelos? Es decir,
posicionamiento en el campo, perfil corporal, el perfil a la hora de hacer el salto. Lo mismo en pases fallados, pues oye, te percibes antes de recibir, te perfilas antes, controlas con pierna lejana, estás ocupando bien el espacio. Entonces al final nosotros tenemos mucha información, y la información la transformamos en por qué están pasando las cosas, que eso es lo importante y lo que le tiene que llegar al jugador. Y dentro de ese plan de mejora está, oye, pues mejorar perfiles, y a partir de ahí trabajamos a nivel individual en entrenamientos específicos, no solamente en campo, sino también, pues oye, a lo mejor tolerancia a la frustración muy baja por ciertas actitudes que vemos en el campo. Oye, a lo mejor este jugador es muy bueno en todo, menos en esta pata que es la parte psicológica. Vamos a trabajar con psicólogo porque creemos que eso a ti como jugador te va a ser mucho mejor.
Y en esta misma línea que has mencionado de jugadores que infravaloran su rendimiento, ¿ocurre también al revés?
Sí, también hay jugadores que te dicen soy muy bueno en todo, y luego los datos dicen lo contrario, el video dice lo contrario, y obviamente a nosotros, para encaminar, entre comillas, un poco al jugador, nos sirve mucho el mostrarle video, el mostrarle datos y decirle, oye, mira, tú crees esto, pero no es la realidad es esta, y tienes que mejorar estos aspectos del juego, o estos aspectos a nivel psicológico, o a nivel nutricional, o a nivel
Claro,
de preparación
entiendo que
física.
ese feedback prácticamente en tiempo real es muy útil, ¿no?, para un jugador.
Claro, que es lo que te decía antes. el que clicaba los eventos o hacía los cortes de video se demoraba toda la semana. Hasta que le llegaba el psicólogo, hasta que le llegaba el preparador físico, han pasado 4 días. Hoy, con el acceso a la plataforma, todos, analistas, psicólogo, preparador físico, entrenadores, lo tienen en el mismo momento. Entonces ya cada uno desde su área va filtrando lo que desde cada área es importante, teniendo en cuenta que no van separadas, que una va relacionada con la otra, porque entendemos el fútbol pues como una mesa, cada pata es importante.
Y mira, esto me está recordando a mi hermano, que es entrenador en la cantera del Atlético, cuando le menciono todos estos temas de los datos, sobre todo de la cantera, y dime tú un poco más de información, dice que ayuda mucho a nivel de gamificación porque los niños, los adolescentes, se sienten más profesionales, ¿no? Se sienten, mira, estoy como en el FIFA, tengo mis datos, tal. ¿Notas también algo así a nivel emocional de que ellos tienen ese...?
Sí, de hecho ellos tienen acceso a la aplicación, a su perfil, pues cada vez que se sube el partido está analizado, a ellos les llega una notificación de que se ha analizado su partido. Y sí es verdad que muchas veces se están comparando o incluso se pican entre ellos, como mira ese corte donde has dado mal el pase o donde no has defendido bien centro lateral o donde no sé qué. Entonces, bueno, como que van jugando con eso y es verdad que muchos jugadores nos dicen, me siento como en el FIFA, por la cantidad de datos o videos que tienen en el momento.
Muy interesante, muchas gracias. And now, Sayak, we were just talking about the complexity of the data that they have to somehow like translate for the players, but before it gets to them, you have to do, again, your magic, right? So how do you help to make this like valuable, understandable information?
Sure. So as I said, like our primary innovation was creating an AI-driven system that could convert raw match footage into individual and collective level data, right? So once we achieved that, we understood, okay, numbers are great, but not everyone can interpret them. And if you don't have the right context, then numbers can really be misleading as well. Because let's say there's a player who has been instructed not to press, and he's seeing that, okay, his pressing numbers are not that good. Someone might think that, okay, this player is not good in pressing, but maybe it was the tactic. So without certain relevance, certain context, numbers, like the data is not that meaningful. So we tried to understand how we could make more impact in that entire workflow. Because, as Sebas mentioned, see, time is of utmost essence. If you have a match today and then it's taking like a couple of days to generate basic data, then you don't really have time to communicate that information with the players, share the insights, help them develop, and then again try to see whether they've improved in the next game or not. So here what we do is we have created a lot of models in form of information design, where we use the raw data collecting from the computer vision model to translate into visualizations which are very familiar with coaches and players, like your tactic board diagrams where you can see your passing network, involvement of the players, and it has context surrounding it. So right now, like very recently we had a discussion with Sebas to further understand how we can enhance the process, and we understood like every coach or every analyst, they are creating an individual development program for the players. And they are already working on certain criteria where they want the player to improve. So now if we can map the two, let's say a player, you want him to improve in aggressiveness, in terms of winning duels, etc. And from our engine, we are able to collect that level of insight that, oh, what he's doing overall, but what he's doing specifically in the areas where the coach wants him to improve. So now when we correlate both of the two, it allows the coaches as well as the players to have objective information in the form of, let's say, okay, I needed to improve these aspects, and whether I've actually been able to improve or not. So let's say your passing range is not that great, and you're going out and doing a lot of drills to improve that. Firstly, the data allows you to understand and measure whether you've developed or not. But now using this new type of models through visualizations, through graphics and animation, we can now leverage that information. And with new models coming up in the form of like ChatGPT and like your Sora and all of this, we are also integrating a part of large language model to further interpret this raw numbers into understandable languages. So just put in a query, okay, how this player played, So it looks into the developmental criteria of the players, and it throws you the insight. Okay, this player was supposed to improve here, he has improved this much, but there is this scope of improvement. So it becomes much more faster, the entire workflow of like collecting information, to generating insights, to communicating to the players and creating, let's say, bespoke developmental plans for them. So I think AI, the most impact is in the form of like time, in the form of how fast the decisions can be made, and with the very high accuracy as well.
Ahí, Paulo,
Thank you very much.
Paulo, ahí me gustaría un poco puntualizar una cosa, que hay un tema tabú con el tema de la inteligencia artificial, de que si tienes eso, pues menos recurso humano, ¿no? Y más bien es todo lo contrario. O sea, el recurso humano está enfocado a lo que es importante de verdad, que es qué haces con esa información que te está dando la IA, y la gastas en tiempo, pues de reunirte con el jugador, de hablar, de estar más en el día a día que estar en la oficina clicando datos en un ordenador. Que creo que es súper importante el estar en el día a día y no en el ordenador, sino con el jugador y dándole lo que realmente es importante de información.
Así que podemos decir en cierto modo que lo que la IA está haciendo es potenciando el factor humano.
Para mí sí, en fútbol.
Interesante, reflexión interesante. Y de hecho, mira, la siguiente tema que te quería comentar, de adolescente, mi padre fue director del Atlético de Madrid cuando tenía yo, no sé, unos 13 o 14 años. Y cuando le he mencionado sobre estos temas, a él el primer miedo, el canguelo que le puede venir es, vale, estos datos son geniales, pero ¿y si otros equipos tienen acceso a ellos? Le da ese miedo, ¿no? Sobre todo a alguien que no está familiarizado. ¿Cómo os protegéis vosotros como equipo de que estos datos tan sensibles no lleguen a otros equipos o competidores?
Obviamente no todos tienen acceso a la plataforma. Dentro de la plataforma hay una seguridad y con la empresa lo tenemos hablado del tema de protección de datos, porque para nosotros obviamente hay jugadores que son un activo, o sea, los jugadores para nosotros son un activo y tenemos que cuidar ese activo. Entonces no todo el mundo tiene acceso a esa información, y el que tiene acceso a esa información la puede utilizar solamente para la parte profesional, y no todos tienen acceso, ¿vale? Es gente...
Sí, además podréis monitorizar quién se ha conectado, etcétera,
eso es,
etcétera.
cuándo ha sido la última conexión, qué ha sido descargado, qué no ha sido descargado, qué información han sacado, si se está utilizando esa información que se ha descargado para lo que realmente queremos que se utilice, o si se ha utilizado para otra cosa, pues que no es importante para nosotros.
Entiendo. And Jesse, from the point of view of a league, how do you see all this privacy related with data?
Yeah, I mean, it's so important, you know, I think for a couple of different reasons. I mean, you know, we're obviously living in an information age, right? And I think what has helped us all become aware of is that, you know, information has real value, right? Sometimes we call it intellectual property, sometimes we call it other things. But ultimately, the information that we have that somebody else doesn't gives us a competitive advantage. And again, I think when I reflect on what's driven the growth of Major League Soccer during my time that I was there, and the growth of the sport in the U.S. in general, you know, again, I think it's a similar theme of, and I saw it happen with, we had owners of Major League Soccer professional teams that didn't operate any academies, no había juveniles. But a decision was made that said, okay, for us to grow and to develop as a league, we're going to mandate this. And, you know, every team was given a certain amount of time, 5 years, to implement academies at priority age groups. And the reason I think all that's relevant to this conversation is none of them would have done it if they didn't believe that they could protect the value of the players that they were developing, right? That they would be able to monetize those players. And a lot of work's been done over the years to help them, you know, protect that investment. Because ultimately, if there can't be a return on that investment, they're not gonna commit to it. And so I think here it's the same thing, and I think that's why it's so important that at the same time these technologies are being created, and this is obviously part of the tension that we see if we zoom out a little more broadly of how open is the use of a technology versus how restricted it is. And different companies have different philosophies on it, and it's part of what's creating the arms race in technology.
What would be your personal opinion on that?
Well, I'm certainly not qualified to
Yes,
have an
you
opinion
are.
on it in general, but obviously, Sam Altman at OpenAI think one way, and Mark Zuckerberg at Meta thinks another way, and we'll see who ends up being right. But I do think that in general, and I think where it's relevant here is that we need to have some common sense,
Yeah.
and I think if the race is about how do we get the most users, how do we have the most scale, I think that we can see that there's dangers in that, and it can be irresponsible, and I think the people that will suffer the most will be the players ultimately, right? And so I think creating the right sort of common sense protections so that this can be safeguarded in the right way is going to allow this to really be used, the way that it should be, which is, I think we're all here because we love, I call it soccer, perdón, but we all love football, right? We want to see it continue to grow and to develop, and so I think that's where, if we can harness what these technologies can do for good, and a big part of that is making sure that, we have the right protections in place.
Indeed. And Sayak, from the point of view of the platform, like how do you ensure the data?
Sure. As Desi mentioned, I think at this era of information being readily available, us putting stuff out there into any platform, I think it's kind of a edgy situation we're in, because we don't although we are getting a lot of benefits, we are not able to understand or foresee what the dangers might be. So right now there are like a lot of trends going on, right? You upload one of your picture and it gets converted into like some Japanese anime art style, but at this moment in time it's all fun, but we don't really know the ultimate usage of the information that we are uploading to an AI model. And at StepOut, we have been very, very wary about this fact from the very beginning, because the motivation behind starting StepOut was always to kind of enable and uplift players, academies, coaches, institutions who are really kind of pushing the boundaries to develop the next generation icons. And for them, the investment that they're making into the players, if that data is exposed, and somehow player poaching happens, somehow there is like some misuse of that data happens, it means that that entire investment goes in drain. So at StepOut, when we generate the information, we firstly encode it so that if someone is hacking or even someone is getting access to it, they're not able to interpret it. For them, it'll be like some gibberish, alphanumerical text out there. Moreover, we have a very unique way of securing and storing the data. So for example, the player's performance information is stored in a separate database, whereas the player's personal information, such as like his name, height, weight, etc., is stored in a different database. And all these databases are further stored into like market-leading cloud services such as Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services, etc. And all this thing allows us to kind of protect at the end of the day, the investments of the organizations we work with. So in that case, we envision a world where going ahead, every player, every coach, every team, they have access to their own digital performance footprint. And going ahead, it can be translated into, let's say, a digital CV, which can be shared across. And in this case, the control and the access of this information is going to be very, very essential. There are organizations out there where you can see like you upload a match, it gets analyzed, and suddenly, poof, it's available in a public data set. And that means like the players that you have invested upon, you're striving day in, day out to develop, they are exposed. They are exposed to a lot of threats, a lot of misuses. And that is something at StepOut we have taken serious steps, serious protocols to mitigate. And here everything is encrypted, everything is stored in a password protected account, and no one outside that organization gets access. And even within that organization, we have access control. So let's say there's a central access to a select few who can see all the players. And then each team of the different youth section and their trainers, like their coaches, have access to only those teams' information. So we have tried to create an entire structure keeping in mind the data integrity, so that such misuses, such malpractices can be limited.
Okay, thank you very much. Like now, like the final part, Jesse, we all live in this like FOMO, right? Of the overall AI advances changing almost weekly.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to do a foresight of what's going to happen. But from your intuition and expertise,
Yeah.
how do you think all this AI and football relation is going to evolve?
Yeah, I mean, my observation from getting to work with the people that you see here, right? Getting to work with leaders like Seba and Sayak and his team at StepOut. To me, what it's confirmed is that I think because we're in this technology, transformation era, right? This third industrial revolution that's coming our way. I believe more than ever that the future is going to belong to the most curious. And I think that there will be kind of two, I think we can kind of divide the future into two different groups of people. I think there'll be people that will ask, what does this technology do? And I think there's going to be people that ask, how can I use this technology, right? What can I do with this? And I think it maybe sounds like the same question, but they're actually two very different things. And so, yesterday I had the privilege of joining a meeting with Sebastian's team at Rayo Vallecano and Sayak and the founders, Jeet and Sai from StepOut. And at the table from Sebastian's team, we had two psychologists from Rayo Vallecano there. And their curiosity, right, is helping to push forward the technology, because we're sitting there at the table having a discussion. Sayak and Jeet are talking about, hey, here's some of the things that StepOut can do today that it couldn't do yesterday, right? Because that's the reality of this technology, and that's kind of the privilege of getting to live in this moment and work with leaders and innovators, like the people here. But it takes curious people like the psychologists at Rayo Vallecano that are asking questions that haven't been asked before and are saying, well,
can you share one of these questions?
I can't reveal any trades. Like we said, intellectual property information. You'll have to check back in a few months. But they were really kind of probing at things that impact how they want to use this as psychologists, and those questions are unlocking new ideas that now the team at StepOut and the engineers are going back and saying, actually, yeah, we think we can do that. And if he wants to use it that way, well, he's probably not the only person that wants to use it that way. And so I think there's a real opportunity for the people that are curious and I share that because to your question, right? Again, if we sort of zoom out a little bit, there's a lot of anxiety right now about technology. And I think that's understandable, but I think if we meet it with anxiety, then we're probably more in the camp of where we're going to ask, what does this technology do? And is that a good thing or a bad thing? Versus I think the people that are going to lead us to wherever we get to are going to say, how can I use this? How can I use this in new ways and to imagine something different? And I think that's probably very much in the spirit of what this summit is and why it's exciting to kind of be here. And I've already gotten to see that as well, of just these are where those kinds of breakthroughs happen.
Okay, that's very interesting. So just to finish, I don't know if any of you would like to add something, Sebas.
No, lo que decía un poco Jesse, que para nosotros, que lo que queremos que entiendan los jugadores, los entrenadores, es que tengan esa visión un poco más amplia de que toda la información que recibimos se puede utilizar desde muchas áreas, no solamente la parte de fútbol análisis, sino también desde lo que decía, psicología, nutrición, preparación física, y cómo podemos integrar toda esa información para que al jugador le llegue lo importante y que mejore lo que realmente tiene que mejorar. Entonces creo que un poco la conclusión es esa, ¿no? De esa información, qué hacemos con esa información, cómo se la transmitimos al jugador, y que se tenga esa visión de el jugador no es solo el balón, hay algo más alrededor al que se le puede sacar mucho provecho de todo el data que tenemos.
Muchas gracias. So, just to end some personal highlights of this conversation, I would say that the importance that we all know of real-time verifiable feedback towards performance, the importance of this holistic approach of adding up different sources of information that before didn't look a natural mix, and all the potential in there. I also really liked that AI is being helpful to develop the human part. Right, that's probably what, in the end, it's 11 players against 11 players and people that are there. So if the AI can take out all the boring part so that we can focus in being more humans, that's amazing. And the last phrase, the future belongs to the curious. So thank you very much.
Gracias, Paulo.